I definitely agree with Brother Glazier about I feel like I'm still getting my wheels underneath me from the holidays. And the weather doesn't help either. It seemed like it's a little bipolar this week, but that's okay. We're back to normal cold weather, which makes me happy, and that's all right. But I'm excited about what God's doing. I've learned that through change and through things growing, there's pressure. And when you give that pressure, sometimes it can be looked at as a problem or something is wrong, but it's just things that are making you better. They're building you. They're building you up. I've learned that when you have a problem, sometimes you can't just fix it. Sometimes you have to break it down to rebuild it. And I'm grateful for what God's doing at TAC. This morning, I would simply have a message that I'd like to talk that God laid on my heart is faith. What is faith? I saw a quote I loved. It says, "Faith is the bird that feels the light and sings when the dawn is still dark." We all know it. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Faith shows reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see." From the Bible as a whole, faith can be summarized as faith is trusting God, His character, His promises, and His word, and the fact that He lived. I heard one person say, if you don't trust God, you won't ever see God. We all have our ways of explaining faith. It's easy to say or use that word till it's almost cliche. We can believe God to move mountains for somebody else, for their needs, for their family, for their situation. We can cry, we can beg God, we know God's going to meet that need, and we have that faith. But when it comes to us, when it comes to our needs and our family, it can feel like a bridge too far. We struggle to ask for help. We convince ourselves that everyone else is too busy, too burdened, too bothered to care. And sometimes we even think God is too busy for us as well. But I'm here to tell you this morning, that's not how God works. Hebrews 11:6 says, "It is impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to Him must believe that God exists and that He rewards those who sincerely seek Him." You know, I was typing my lesson out yesterday and I was like, I could almost stop there. It is impossible to please God without faith. To seek Him sincerely simply means to be intentional. It doesn't just happen. You're not going to just walk into it. You have to seek Him. You have to find it. Mark 5:27 says, story of the woman with the issue of blood. She had heard about Jesus. So she came up behind Him through the crowd and touched His robe. For she thought to herself, if I can just touch His robe, I will be healed. We all know the story of the woman with the issue of blood. She admits that she's tried everything. She reached out to every doctor, every friend. She's probably, in today's world, she probably posted on Facebook 3 or 4 times. But she reaches for Jesus and does so in a way that stops everything and everyone. Jesus asked the crowd, who touched me? And He said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over. Her faith was intentional. She pursued Jesus. The Bible says she was shaking and cowering before the crowd. But she put all the pressure, all the fears aside, and she said within herself, Jesus has my answer. Sometimes faith moves toward Jesus, and sometimes faith stands still and refuses to bow. The story of the 3 Hebrew boys, probably one of my favorite stories in the Bible, Daniel 1-3. This is a story, to me, it's real faith. It's not a talk about it faith. It's not a Sunday only faith. It's not here will be a Sunday, Tuesday faith, but faith that stands when pressure shows up. Faith gets proven even when you don't choose the situation, only how to respond. We all know the names of the Bible. There were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What I found was interesting, I guess I read it, but never missed it. These men weren't in Babylon by choice. They didn't just pack their bags and go, hey, we're moving to Babylon. They were taken there. Daniel 1 says, during the 3rd year, I have no idea, I'm calling King J. reigned in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave him victory over King J of Judah, and God allowed this to happen. You see, it was discipline, not abandonment. God didn't leave him there. Then the king chose young men to serve him. And I read that, but I said, what does that mean? What are they trying to say? Then the king ordered, let's go with A, because I'm a butcher at beyond belief, his chief of staff to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and the other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. He says to him, select only the strong, the healthy, and good-looking young men. They didn't pick no ugly men, only the good-looking ones. He said, make sure they are well-versed in every branch of learning and are gifted in knowledge and good judgment and are suited to serve in the royal palace. You know, sometimes faith starts when life gets turned upside down. Faith trusts God even when the situation isn't fair or comfortable. You see, before Babylon ever touched them, their names had already said something about God. Their Hebrew names meant the Lord is gracious, meant who is like God, meant the Lord helps. But then Babylon changed their names. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, as there were the four young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah. The chief of staff renamed them with Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belshazzar, Hananiah was called Shadrach, Mishael was called Meshach, and Azariah was called Abednego. You see, those names that they changed them to, they honored Babylonian gods. All their names were given were tied to Babylonian God. What it is, their names before honored their God. And Babylon said, we're going to strip all of that away, and you're going to honor our God. You see, Babylon was trying to change who they belonged to. But here's the truth. They accepted new names, but they never accepted their new identity. Faith isn't about fighting every label. Faith is about knowing who you serve and who you are. They came to a golden statue. Everyone, King Nebuchadnezzar made a vow. He made a decree and says, everyone must bow to this golden statue. But these three men refuse. Daniel 3, 16 and 18, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from our power, your majesty. Even if he doesn't, we want to make it very clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the golden statue you have set up. I read that in NLT, and it's just that, to me, that's a faith that is just strong. It's unwavering. They didn't say God has to save us. They said God can. But they also preface it, even if he doesn't, we still won't bow. Faith isn't trusting God for the outcome you want. Faith is trusting God because he simply is God. They were thrown into the furnace, and God showed up. Daniel 3, 24 and 25, but suddenly Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and explained to his advisors, didn't we tie up three men and throw them to the furnace? They respond, say, yes, your majesty, we certainly did. They replied. Look, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, this is the king of Babylon. I see four men unbound, walking around the fire, unharmed, and the fourth looks like a god. He said God didn't keep them out of the fire, but he was there with them in it. That kind of faith just doesn't believe. It invites the presence of God. The story shows us real faith look like. Faith that stands when it's easier to bow. When the crowd says, this is the direction we're going to go, and they say, no, we're going to go this direction. Faith stands loyal under pressure. Faith obeys God without demanding guarantees. I heard it said one time, to be a true friend, you have to give expecting nothing in return. You know, when you you live for God and you trust God, you know God when you pray that He'll meet you there. But even if He doesn't, even if I don't ever get another blessing, even if I don't, I know that God has been there for me and He's blessed me beyond belief, that He's done more for me than I could ever be worthy of, and just be grateful, because you have to look at it and say, God, I see what I'm going on, but I'm going to not focus on this. And I talk about it over and over again, but it's horizontally, vertically aligned. But when you stop looking around you, when you stop looking up and say, God, you're all that matters. I have to wonder if the three Hebrew boys didn't look at the king when they said they weren't. The Bible is very clear. They weren't rude. They didn't holler. They weren't disrespectful. But I wonder if they looked up and said, God, just let it be known we're not going to bow. Just let it be known whatever happens, we're with you. We're not letting go. That they understood who they were and they understood where they came from. This past week while I was praying, God reminded me of a story I shared in here a few years ago. After a Tuesday night service a few years ago, my family and I sat down to eat. Not long after, someone asked Judah, my little boy, they asked him what his name was. He jumped up in confidence and proud. He said, my name is Judah McGuire. You see, we adopted Judah on June 20th of that year. His name was legally changed to Judah Edward Bearce. It was settled. It was finished. No question about it. But just recently, we had re-enrolled him into preschool. On our end, everything was changed. Paperwork, forms, records. But on their end, his old name was still in the system. So all day long, without anyone meaning harm, he was being called by a name that no longer belonged to him. When I heard it, I'll be honest, my heart stopped. Got a little angry. But not because of where he came from, but how hard we had worked to get to where we are today. But Jimmy, I knelt down next to him and I said, no, buddy, your name is Judah Bearce. And the next day, I felt the Lord press on me to keep reminding him, because a child will believe what he hears spoken with confidence. All week long, I'd ask him, hey, Bubba, who are you? And he'd answer loud and proud, my name is Judah Edward Bearce. You see, June 20th settled it. There's no undoing it. He didn't earn that name. He didn't have to prove himself. It was given to him because he belongs. And right there, God showed me something. That's how faith works. God gives us a new name not because of what we've done, but because of who we belong to. And trust is choosing to believe that God says about us, even when the world keeps calling us by our old name. There's power in the name that God gives. There's freedom in standing in it. You see, Judah is a Bearce because he's my son, because he's our son. And when God calls you his, that settles it. It's done. Martin Luther King said, faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. All through the Bible, reading the Bible through the year, I always find it intriguing. People will question God. They'll say, show me a sign, show me a sign. Prove yourself, do this. Let me put out a fleece before you, so I know you're really there. And every time God was patient. But hear me, faith is never meant to live on conditions or prefaces or preconditions. But what if this year we stop asking God to prove himself and started proving our trust in him? Real faith doesn't wait for clarity. Real faith moves while the staircase is still hidden. Don't fear the process. Don't fear what God is doing in your life. You may look at me and say, Brother Bearce, but you don't understand. This is too much. But hear me clearly. God does his greatest work in the middle of struggle. If you're going through it this morning, my challenge is don't stop. Keep going, because sometimes what feels like you're being buried is God planting you for what's next. You see, you have to trust the process. You have to stand on your faith. You have to know this without a doubt. I use the analogy in the past, if you ever meet an older gentleman, like I have a customer and he's a Chevy guy. I mean, that's all he is, a Chevy. And you can't talk him out. You couldn't give him a Ford because he understands Chevy. That's what he is. He's worked on them. He's rebuilt them. He's fixed them. He understands it. That's who he is. I couldn't give him my truck. He would give it away. But he understands it. He's sold on it. And that's how you have to be with God. You have to be sold on it and go, you're not going to talk me out of this. I've had a lady that I've told a story before that I was in her office. She's my boss. She said, Jason, you don't have to live that way. You don't have to do that. And I told her, I said, Miss Dye, with all due respect, you've come a little too late. God's been too good to me. I've watched God heal my babies. I've watched God do things financially for me. I've watched God take my family. I've watched take my girls when I thought they were gone and put all the pieces back together. You've come too late. God has been too good to me. Faith isn't pretending we could see what's ahead. Faith is closing our eyes and trusting the one who already sees. Some of us keep waiting to understand before we obey. And that's been me. I want to see all the answers. I want to see 30. I'm that 5, 10, 15. So I want to see 20 years ahead. But God says, I just want you to trust the next step. I just want you to walk with me. I just want you to say, hold my hand. Trust me with that. And what does that mean? That means you're going through the drive-thru, you're at work, you have a boss, you have a connection, you have something, and allow God to use you in that connection and be open to that. And they can see God in you. I said a story here a while back, and I remember waiting tables at Cassoulet, and the Cisco's came in, and that waitress, she just walked up and just bawled and walked away. And he's like, what happened? And she said, I just felt Jesus when I talked to him. And that's been my prayer my whole life. I said, God, I don't want people to bawl when they see me, of course, but I want them to feel Jesus. I want them to feel peace. I want them to feel joy. I want them to wonder what's different about him. What's going on in his life? What does he have that I don't have? And it's the same thing with my family. Different things. My mom will still text me and, hey, your uncle's very sick. Please pray. Or, hey, this is going on. Or customers will reach out. And don't ever be afraid to respond and go, I am going to pray for you. But not just say it. Because I'm busy. I'll get busy and I'll say, God, you know what's going on. I'll stop right then and I'll let them know. Hey, I prayed for you and I prayed for your family and I prayed that God would bless them, that God would heal them. You have to not be afraid of letting God work. Sometimes we want to hold all the controls, and that's me. I'm a recovering control freak. I want to know from end to beginning. But you say, and Brother Carr uses the analogy all the time. We know what the next step is, but when you step that 2 degrees out, it's uncomfortable. We don't know what that next step is. We've never been there. We're used to this. When we know what the next step is, we know what all to be expected. We know what's going on. But when you step that next step out and say, God, this is real uncomfortable, but I'm here and I trust you and I'm going to do this or whatever you've led me to do, or I'm going to speak, or we're going to have the testimony service in a few weeks. God, you've been good to me, and I'm going to tell the church about it. I'm going to tell somebody here about it. And you may say, that's not for me, brother. I'm not doing it. What if somebody here doesn't feel alone after you say what you've been through, because they realize they're not the only person that's gone through what you've gone through, and they can understand because you went through what you through, and y'all can be friends, and God can make those connections together. You never know what God can do. That's a shameless plug, by the way. Some of us keep waiting to understand before we obey, but faith says, guide my hand, Lord, and I'll follow. My challenge to you this year is just follow God. Don't be afraid to start over reading the Bible. Don't be afraid to try a different version. Don't be afraid to listen to the Bible. I have a friend of mine, I send him it's an Audible, it's an NLT, it's dramatized version. And once a week, he'll text me. He's like, bro, I share it with this person. 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 And it's just, don't be afraid to get outside the box we find ourselves in, and to pray and talk to God. And people go, well, I pray I don't hear God, but I'll ask them, did you read the Bible today? Because that's God talking to us. That's conversations. That's listening to that word every day, and understand that there's things that there's more there. I don't care if you read it there before. I never put all the pieces with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and where they came from and how they got there and all the context there. There's so much there that God has placed that at the appropriate time, He'll bless you and He'll help you and He'll encourage you with that. Don't be afraid of that. To get a hold of that and say, God, that's what I'm going to do this year. And that's what I'm commit to. And do I fall behind every year? Absolutely. But do I keep going? Absolutely. And that's what it's all about, is just stepping out and say, God, I put my hand in your hand and I ain't letting go. I ain't giving up. I'm not quitting. I don't care what's going on in my life or my family's life. This is how I'm going to live. Me and my family are going to serve God. And we're going to live for God this year in a way that maybe we never have. Maybe at a different level. And we're going to grow. We're going to reach out. We're going to come to more prayer meetings. We're going to be more involved with church. We're going to do more. We're going to ask more. We're going to pray more. And God will lead those things. He'll make those connections, but you can't be afraid of them. And God will meet you there. I love each and every one of y'all. Thank y'all so much.